I'd say it's pretty safe to say the Nissan 240SX is probably the most iconic drift car. If you look at budget drift cars, the Nissan 350Z probably takes the cake. And if you go all the way back into Japan, some of the best platforms to start with because of their turbo 4 cylinders was no one other than the 240SX. And it seems like anytime you start talking about drift cars, Nissan pops up everywhere in terms of a car that you could buy, or should modify until you blow it up or throw it into a wall, because at the end of the day, drift cars get absolutely demolished by their owners, and that's okay. But why does it seem like Nissan is always there when it comes to drift cars? And I would argue that maybe Nissan are the best drift cars. I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram, and I'm over here on Torque Motorsport to talk about cars and if Nissan is probably one of the best manufacturers for drift cars. So don't forget to subscribe, drop a comment below on what you think is the best drift car out there right now, and of course, maybe we'll agree with you, disagree with you, or cause a little, maybe a little argument. We'll see how it all goes. Now, if you look at Nissan all the way back in the day, back in the early 60s, Nissan's always had a thorough root in motorsport racing. In fact, the chairman of the board way back in the 60s was a racer. And once they acquired Prince Motors with Nissan and they went through that entire upheaval over in Japan, the transition into sports cars became a very prominent piece of Nissan's history. They started going into making the Datsun 240Z or the Fairlady Z, the 260, the 280, the 300. My favorite numbers seem to be in like this entire range. The 350Z, the 370Z. You had the GTRs and things like that, sure, but really one of the key things that made Nissan super special was the fact that they went into the sports car segment really aiming for a budget-oriented coupe sports car. They wanted something that everyone could jump in and everyone could get their hands on. So when you look at one of the main reasons that you see Nissans everywhere in the drift scene, one, obviously because they're international, but two, it's because they were so well supported, so mass produced, and at such a good price. It made it a very easy car to jump into regardless of the budget that you were really starting with. That's something that Nissan has always done incredibly, incredibly well. The next thing is their chassis. Like when you look at Nissan, one of the things that I always try to keep in mind is they're one of the few brands that you really get a lot out of the chassis. You get really great weight distribution. I think when you look at the 240s, even the S13s and S14s, I want to say they ran a 55-45 weight distribution, which is pretty great for a stock OEM, kind of underpowered car, but still great in terms of drivability. You had a very light chassis on the 240SX. They were very light cars, which means that you could toss them around really well if you had a little bit more power in the car. And of course, on top of that, the actual chassis design and the weight reduction paired with the fact that it was just a really great driver's response. The wheelbase was solid. Everything about the car was just perfectly planted to be a great driving car. And typically when things are great driving cars, they're not always great drift cars, but in this case, with a rear-wheel drive, LSD, you had that front mid-engine style design in a lot of the Nissan cars, it made it a great platform to slide sideways. One of the main reasons that Nissan continues to be so popular in the drift scene, whether you're a beginner and you're jumping into a 350Z, whether you're an amateur that's got a little bit of money, maybe you're jumping into a 240SX, or you're one of them pro drift boys at Formula Drift and you're rocking an S15 Silvia because you don't have to worry about them being road legal because they're ripping up the track, is that they have something for everyone. Even when 240s were incredibly cheap, everyone could jump into them. Even 350Zs nowadays, they're actually really easy to find. And when you look at other things internationally, like S15s, obviously that's kind of a halo car, but you really can never go wrong with a Nissan. Now you can go wrong with somebody else's Nissan that was absolutely torn to bits and pieces and has, like crooked fenders or crooked frame rails or rust everywhere because, again, these were budget entry-level sports cars. These weren't like high-end tier halo cars that were absolutely perfect in every single way. They're still Japanese cars that came overseas that didn't have the same rust like resilience as some of its competitors in the USA side, but those are just things that you have to keep in mind, which is why if you're ever looking to pay a bro tax on a car, I probably wouldn't do it on a 240SX, at least not right now. If you are jumping into a drift car, go get a Nissan 350Z. Nissans have had this thing for a long time. They're affordable, they're mass produced, they've been made since the dawn of time. Nissan has always been a car company, up until probably pretty recently, that they've always tried to cater at least one model or two models specifically to an automotive enthusiast because that is in their blood. That's what they've always been about. And now that they're coming back with the Nissan Z, which I think is gonna be a fantastic platform to drift in, which you guys let me know if you think we should drift it, but they continue to do that. So you have something that's relatively affordable, mass-produced, sold internationally, has a ton of parts, has a ton of community support, has really great weight distribution, known to be pretty light, good LSDs, and you have the recipe as to why Nissan is so good at making drift cars, because everybody can jump into them and pretty much go anywhere you want with the build. Now, not every single type of car can do that. And sure, there are other platforms of cars you can jump into for drifting. You can jump into different stuff that's rear wheel drive and still a lot of fun, but there's a reason why so many people jump into Nissans. I would be happy to jump into a Nissan. Now, I just wanted to get something that was a little bit different, so we ended up getting a Gloria for now, and then we manually swapped it, put a cos 2-way diff in that bad boy, and I can't wait to be the absolute worst at drifting for the longest period of time. But I think Nissan still is probably one of the best car manufacturers when it comes to drifting, and they'll continue to be that way as long as they make budget-friendly cars that have kind of crappy interior, but it doesn't matter because the LSD's sick, the power's pretty decent, you can engine swap them, mod them, you can do whatever you want to them, and they seem to just take it well. Almost equivalent to the Honda Civic, it feels like. They're just solid platforms. But let me know what you think about Nissan, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. Let us know your thoughts below, and of course, we'll see you next 2 weeks from now. We're covering Irwindale's content, so please don't forget to subscribe. Super excited to be there. I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores. We talked about cars for a little bit, and we will see you later. Adios.